My name is Trevor Lecca. I'm Dubsado's Customer Education Specialist. Today, we have a webinar that's all about streamlining your interior design business. And we've got a really fantastic presenter here for you today. Her name is Taylor Hedden. She is a Dubsado certified specialist. She has been a Dubsado certified specialist from the very beginning. So she's been with us for a long time. She's got a ton of Dubsado knowledge. She's completed over 200 custom Dubsado builds. And she's also taken on new clients. So if you want to stick around to the end of the webinar, you can see her current offerings and drop her a line if you're interested in acquiring her services. Without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Taylor Hedden.
Hello, everyone. I'm so excited to be here. I already see some familiar names. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So I've worked in over 45 industries in Dubsado. And over the past couple of years, I recently started working with more and more interior designers, a couple dozen by this point. Some that are published, featured HGTV designers, some that are brick and mortar with a team of one, all the way to mega design firms that are doing commercial and residential. So I am giving you not only my knowledge of Dubsado today, but a peek behind the curtain of some really incredible businesses and how they operate and how they've used Dubsado to create a luxe interior design business. We have Tampa. I love Tampa. Oh, London and Central France. Very cool. Canada. We have a lot of people all over. This is awesome. So get distraction free. I am a talker. I give a lot of information. So I am going to hopefully sit here for 30 minutes and give you everything I can, and then we'll open up questions at the end. We'll have the Q&A. And then, of course, make sure you follow me at Chanel and Lee. That way, if you have to leave early, I will have a special goodie for you guys, a discount at the end. So make sure you follow me there so we can connect. Let's go ahead and dive in. So this talk is all about, yes, streamlining your interior design business, but I am going to be sharing some different strategies, not only to use Dubsado, but also to enhance client interactions and to really help you create those raving fans in your projects so you can have that seamless experience from start to finish. So we're going to kind of go through some different areas here, and we will have Dubsado up in a little bit, meaning if you have questions about specific Dubsado pieces or features that I mentioned in this, make sure to note those down. At the end, I can also pull up the actual Dubsado system and show you specific things in there that we discuss in the lesson. So let's just go ahead and start with this. Go ahead and drop in the chat to you, in your opinion, what makes a luxury interior design experience? In your opinion, maybe it's something that you offer, maybe it's a certain type of experience you provide or a certain level of service. Go ahead and drop it in the chat. I want to hear this first before I move on to my first fancy stat, which if you know me, you know my trainings, I always leave you with a really intense stat just to make you think a little bit. So tell me in the chat, what's your idea of a luxury interior design experience? And I'm going to tell you mine first while you brainstorm. I just worked with an interior designer for my mother-in-law's renovation this past year. She did $1 million renovation. So it was a very intense project. And I remember right off the bat, one of the things that to me was a hallmark of a amazing interior design experience was the level of communication. This team communicated at every phase of the project. If there was a delay, if there was an issue, when they were going to be there, when their teams and vendors were going to be there. I mean, it was top tier communication, the level of access we had. Personalized processes, customer care. Yes, personalization, so huge, right? Especially if people are spending a lot of money on a design project and inviting you into their most sacred spaces. Having that personalization is so important. Keep dropping them in the chat for me. I'm going to share this stat with you. This was actually a survey taken by another Dubsado specialist who I love dearly, Fran. She collected this data, and the data said that when service providers, i.e. you, a service provider in the design industry, when your deliverables are high quality, meaning your end result, your end design, but your experience is poor, meaning what you did leading up to that end result, 82% of those people would not refer you to someone else, and 82% of them would not work with you again. We all know in an industry like design or interiors, referrals are huge, right? And the impact that you leave on your clients, and not just your clients, but potential clients, right? Or peers, vendors. It is so important that we're leaving a lasting impact because that's going to turn into future business. So it's not just the end result. I don't doubt you guys all have an incredible design process that you do to get these amazing designs, but how we get our clients to that point, starting from the very first contact, is extremely important. So In the end, to put it blankly, your results mean nothing if the experience is subpar. So, how can we build this mind blowing experience, and how are we going to use Dubsado to do it? First and foremost, we need to understand the client's needs. One of the top questions I get asked when I'm building custom Dubsado accounts for interior designers is, how do I vet leads, right? How do I make sure we're the right fit? How do I know that their budget is even within what I'm offering within my own services? How can we make sure we're an aligned project? Because there's nothing worse than kicking off a project with something like interiors and realizing it's not the right fit, right? So asking the right questions at the right time. And this all starts with your inquiry process, how we are collecting those leads into our pipeline. Not only does it really set the stage and it's the catalyst for this experience, right? But it's also helping you understand if these potential leads are the best fit for your services and also how you can serve them, right? Because we all have different levels of service, whether you do consultations or full renovations or styling, which option is the best for these leads? So keeping your contact form simple. Obviously, Dubsado has a lead capture form we're embedding directly onto our website. But a huge mistake that I see very often, especially with interiors, is asking too many questions, right? The goal of a lead is to capture the lead, not spend 18 minutes for that person trying to answer all of these questions. We just want to capture the lead and get that instant access to this client via email or phone, and then continue to ask the right questions later. What I love about this process is being able to follow up with a lead in Dubsado before we ask them to get on a phone call, right? That's always another question interior designers are like, how do I save time on calls and not waste time answering questions over and over that I could answer prior to a consultation? And it's probably why many of you might offer paid consultations, because all of a sudden it turns into an entire design proposal on a phone call versus a free discovery call, right? So capturing information first is key. The more you know about this client, the more personalized you can make each step. And some of you just said a personalized process is one of the hallmarks of a luxury experience. And that really does start at the beginning, not just when that client has paid you and actually become a client. So this might look like foreign to you, but if you're not familiar with Dubsado, this is an example of a workflow. If I were you right now, go ahead and screenshot this real quick on your computer, take a picture. This is an actual workflow I would build for a client, and this is an inquiry process, right? So talking about how can we capture more information about our leads when they come into our funnel. My favorite way to do this, keeping our contact form simple, maybe asking questions like, what type of project is this? What's your project timeline and budget, and basic contact information. From there, my first contact I always recommend is a discovery questionnaire. Hey, thanks so much for reaching out to our design firm. We'd love to get to know a little bit more about your project. Here's a quick discovery questionnaire to fill out. This is where we can start asking those questions like, what's your vision? Why is this space important? Or what's the goal for this space? How many people live here? Some questions that are going to help you tailor that next step in the process, i.e. your consultation or your scope of work, right? But because we have them in our system now in Dubsado and we have this workflow operating, we can start to communicate and make sure that we're following up. So you see here, being able to touch back in if that questionnaire isn't completed. Hey, we noticed you haven't completed this discovery questionnaire yet. This is the first step in our design process. We'd love to get to know you more. Fill out as little or as much as you'd like, right? Very easy, again, serving the client. And then going into our next steps, which for most of you might be a consultation or a paid consultation. So this initial inquiry process, again, setting the stage, collecting information. And for those of you who are really wanting to streamline Dubsado, we have the ability to completely automate this process as much or as little as we like. Now, once they're in our system, whether they're booked, maybe they've had a consultation, maybe we're already preparing a scope of work, or for those who are truly already clients, dialogue is everything, right? So someone else mentioned here, Michelle, customer access to me from start to finish. That's all dialogue, right? Serving our clients in that luxury space is making sure that we're not only listening, but we're prompting the dialogue. Do they have access to you? Do they know when they're able to contact you and how? Is that an email? Is that a support team member? Is that a scheduler in Dubsado where they can book a check-in call with you? giving these clients the ability to chat with you at any point in the process, but making it easy for them to do so, i.e., using something like Dubsado is key here, right? Also, following up, which I have another slide on because I want to drill this into your brain. The follow ups are huge. The amount of times I've worked with some of the top designers who say, oh, well, following up makes me sound like I'm needy, or I want them to book, or I'm chasing them. Let's reposition the follow up. The follow up, again, is all about dialogue and serving the client. So instead of saying, hey, you haven't booked yet, let's position it as, what questions do you have? Is there anything in the scope that doesn't feel aligned, right? Do we need to have another call or do a house site visit or have another consultation? Following up, whether it's with a scope of work and contract or whether it's with a design presentation or a concept presentation, it's all about the dialogue. And of course, establishing that communication channel, like I mentioned a second ago, with something like a scheduler. So, kind of what we're seeing here in these screenshots is an example of the Dubsado scheduler. So, if you're already in Dubsado, you might be familiar with just the ease of use of the client being able to easily select a time and date on the calendar. And if you're not super familiar with these, you can even give them the option for different locations or types of meetings, right? So some of my brick and mortar firms, they might have in studio as an option, but maybe they have virtual clients or want to give them that ability to choose. And with that scheduler, we're able to set it up to where it is truly serving the client with their choice of how they want to communicate with the designer, right? And of course, all of our touch points. I love that Dubsado can have the reminder emails and the confirmation emails with a reschedule link even plugged in, right? I remember when I started putting that reschedule button in my own emails years ago, I was like, great, now everyone's going to reschedule and they're never going to get on a consultation call, which is not true. It actually is just way easier because if they need to reschedule, most of them go to the email and simply reschedule according to my time on my own calendar. So this is a huge one, especially for those of you who, like you said, your process is so personalized. Every interaction and every client project is different. So we need to kind of give them different ways and different access to us, right? To kind of serve them where they're at. Secondly, when we're talking about communication, yes, we want to communicate well and we want to have touch points and automations and give them access to us, but we also need to be intentional with our communication, right? It's not just about what we say, which is obviously very important. It's also how we say it, when we say it, and where we say it, right? What's the vehicle? Is it an email? Is it a call? Is it a text? Is it a 10-page PDF? All of that has to be considered in a space like interior design, where again, everything should be personalized for this experience, not only because it's expensive, but because again, it's a huge time investment and energy investment for these clients of yours. So let's look at some best practices for communication. And then I'm going to show you an actual workflow past the proposal phase, but into really the full inquiry, onboarding, and seeing how we can automate a lot of these communication points, again, to just streamline your business. So first, again, I mentioned the follow-up earlier, but this is so important. A lot of the clients I work with, before they get into an automated system in Dubsado, they tell me they're constantly chasing information. They won't fill out this form, or the client won't book this call, or they won't send me the feedback on the design concept, or, communicate XYZ, right? Following up is a part of business. It's a part of what we do to keep our clients accountable and to keep the project on track. At the end of the day, this is some sort of project management, right? Making sure that this project can move, and that does require our clients' attention. And so following up, and again, being strategic with when, but also automating these follow-ups to take the heavy lifting off of you and your team, can change that experience, right? So examples, pending items, right? Looking at how we can schedule these automated follow-ups in our workflow when a form is not completed, when maybe we need to check in about a potential meeting that hasn't been booked, if we need them to complete their scope of work or contract, right? Or even a payment reminder follow-up. I also highly encourage all of my designers to send a post-meeting recap email after every meeting, whether it's in studio, virtual, or on site, sending some kind of outline on what was discussed, what are we working on now, and what is the immediate next action for the client. This is huge. I operate with this in my own business after every meeting, whether it is a strategy call or a training call or a consultation. I immediately send a recap on what to expect next, even if it's as simple as, hey, our consultation was so great. I'm currently preparing your proposal. Keep your eye out in 24 hours. It'll be in your inbox, right? Those post-meeting calls and recaps and next steps, again, eliminating questions that you're going to have to answer over and over again, and gives that client the peace of mind that you've got this taken care of. You know what's happening next. They know what they need to do to make sure you can do your job. And we all have a thread of communication, right? Also, following up with potential leads you have not heard from. And I'm going to throw this out there. Now, some of you may be rolling your eyes, but a minimum of 2 times. Minimum. For myself, I reach out at least 3 or 4, but they're not all the same vehicle, i.e., I'm not sending an email every 2 days, right? My first 2 potential follow-ups might be an email, but then I might head to Instagram and send them a voice note, right? Make it more personal. Maybe they're not getting my email. Maybe it's a team member that looks at that inbox. Following up with your potential leads is not chasing clients. Again, it is making sure they have what they need to make their decision. And so again, thinking about how can you make those follow-ups intentional with what you ask, how you say it, or what information you're providing within that follow-up, right? For example, some of my interior designers who follow up with a lead that has a really big project and they've sent out a really big scope, that second follow-up, they might ask if they want to get on a phone call again, right? A free phone call. Yes, it's more time on their end, but maybe that client needs to discuss the scope a little bit further and a phone call is the easiest method for them. Or maybe they've been putting off that scope of work and they just need a chance to sit and do it with you. These are the types of conversions that happen when we're opening dialogue and paying attention to our client's response time, right? And then, of course, confirming receipt of completed items. This is also a sense of follow up, right? So when you confirm, hey, perfect, we've got your contract. We received that payment. We received the order for XYZ, or we saw that you submitted a feedback form and we're reviewing it now. There's nothing worse from a client's view of completing something and then feeling like you didn't hear from the business owner or the service provider and you're not sure if they received it or what happens next. That is another form of communication we want to focus on. And this is why, in my little note here, workflows are important because, hello, this is 1,000,001 things you have to communicate with clients all day long. And if you have even more than 3 projects at a time, not even considering the vendors you're talking to and the constant site visits and schedules you're managing with your team, this alone is a lot. And so being able to automate some of this, even if it's not completely automated, as in sending without your acknowledgement, having the steps there so you spend less time clicking and typing and redoing the same thing over again, that's the point of the automation and the workflows. And a note on that, a lot of my clients, when they're considering Dubsado and they're in this interior design space, they think automation means everything is going to be sent. It's going to sound like a robot. It's all happening on its own. And that's not true. It can, if you want it to. You absolutely can automate touch points to send without any other trigger or without you actually having to click things, right, based on previous actions. But it can also just be a template set up for you to approve when you're ready or start the next phase when that task of yours has been completed, or even breaking our workflows down into very small chunks that don't feed into each other. So you can just start them when it's time, right? Like many of my designers will have a concept phase workflow. They'll have an install workflow. They'll have a reveal workflow, a punch list workflow, a photo workflow, right? They're not all synced together because every project is different, but now they have the ability to kind of piecemeal when and where their client's at and which automations they need at that time. So with that being said, touch points, right? We just kind of talked about some of the touch points in the terms of following up, but other touch points that can serve different goals through our process that can inform, direct, prepare, or all of the above, right? So we kind of talked about, yes, following up and opening communication when there is a dialogue that the client wants to prompt. But we also want to ensure that we're educating and informing clients throughout this experience. And I found this to be really, really important in those beginning phases of booking and onboarding, because a lot of people don't know what a project entails. They don't know what it means when you say we're going to have 6 weeks of contractors and this many weeks and the ordering and the furniture. Like people just don't know unless they've gone through innovation. They may not be familiar, or they may not be familiar with your specific process. So making sure that we're giving information and really touching base with the client. For example, maybe in your booking process before they actually receive a scope of work, maybe you send like a really nice curated guide about your interior design firm, how you work, how you kind of move through the different phases of a project. That way, before they've ever passed you money, they already have an idea and a sense of how this is going to look and how it's going to work. They can kind of mentally prepare for what's to come, right? There's nothing worse than paying for something, not being prepared because you don't know what to expect, and then being severely underwhelmed, right? That's the last thing we want, especially in this type of industry. And so purposely kind of formatting touch points at different places, whether it's an email with a couple of bullet points on how to prepare for their photo shoot, or whether it's an entire guide for their install day and what they need to do and how they should maybe clean their home or where they should put their pets, right? These are ways that we can serve them, again, to prepare them and make sure that you can do your job the very best you can. Okay. So again, this might look foreign. Don't be underwhelmed. But if you are smart, I would screenshot this because you could use this later. This is an exact workflow, again, that I would build in Dubsado. And it is in my Dubsado account now. So at the end, when we do Q&A, if you want me to go into any of this, I can go into the actual account. Here's an example of proposal all the way through onboarding. So I kind of showed you that inquiry process earlier where they're coming into our workflow through a lead capture. We're sending a discovery questionnaire. We're getting on a consultation call. Fantastic. By that point, you might be going into a scope of work. That's usually what I would call a proposal in Dubsado. So kind of combining the presentation and the scope into one document and having your agreement in the contracts of the Dubsado. There's a lot of confusion there because I know traditionally a scope of work is kind of one document and it's a little bit more verbiage than it is kind of design or experience. But I've done this method with, like I said, dozens of designers now, and it is so delicious. Their clients love it. And I'm going to show you what I'm talking about in terms of design in a second. But with this, we're able to send a scope of work or proposal. And in this example, what I've done here is my scope that I'm sending already has the outline of the design fee, the project, the scope of work. The contract is attached and ready to go. So it doesn't need any edits unless the client obviously counters with a request or some type of addition or subtraction. And then lastly, the design fee is already going to be attached to the proposal. So we're creating this seamless experience where the client is reviewing the scope, seeing the investment, reading the agreement, signing it, making their design fee in one go. And then we're taking it 2 more levels because they're going to automatically go into their onboarding. They're going to start receiving information. So regardless if they completed this and paid at midnight and you're soundly asleep, they don't have to wait for the next details and what's to come. We're giving them that satisfaction after that immediate payment. So that's what we're seeing here. We're sending a proposal. And what I love about this, again, chef's kiss screenshot, is that it's completely automated. Once the designer sends this proposal and they've edited the scope, they've edited the invoice and the fee and all this, they're sending it and they're forgetting it. We already have our follow-ups, meaning if they don't complete that proposal in a day, we're following up with a really great little email. If they don't complete that in 3 days, we're going to follow up one more time and let them know that if we don't start soon, we can't promise their project deadline, in a nice way, of course. And then if they still don't book, we're going to close the lead out. They can come back if they want, but we're just going to archive it. However, if they do move forward, again, that workflow is triggered by a payment. And this is what I love about the booking process and what most of my interior designers will rave about, because yes, once you start a project, it's hard to automate because it's so different for everyone. This is that sweet spot of what makes designers jump to Dubsado and start automating is the inquiry to onboarding, right? Completely automating the lead process, the consultation booking, the proposal, the follow-ups, and then boom, as soon as they book you, we're activating the portal. We're adding a tag. We're changing the status. We're sending them a welcome guide. Maybe you have a task to start their Asana board or do something manually, send them a gift, what have you. And then boom, they're getting their onboarding questionnaire. Like this is just a kind of peek at what's possible when we're automating and being intentional about which information we're sending at which phase, right? So onboarding, always having information to prepare them for the project, like the welcome guide, or maybe an overview of what to expect in the coming weeks or months. Maybe you have some kind of kickoff or onboarding call where you go through some of these pieces and start booking the next dates and things like that. And as you see here, my sweet little post-call recap email that I mentioned. For those of you who aren't super familiar too, those are the approvals I mentioned earlier, where if you don't want to fully automate things, it's okay. We can add an approval to give you that opportunity to edit or change or modify before we do send it to the client. This is kind of an example of the proposal I was mentioning. So this right here, this scope of work that we're sending in this workflow, this is what I'm talking about, right? Having that cohesiveness from your brand to your website to your projects and bringing that into this scope of work phase is kind of a new concept. Trust me, most of the designers I work with are using PDFs or outdated systems, and they rave about how this cohesiveness just sets up the experience, right? Imagine your client opening this and you have copy here that resonates. You have a note from the lead designer. You have a mood board that shows maybe projects that you are inspired by for their project, or maybe you have clippings of certain styles of furniture or colors here. And then they go straight into their scope of work, their timeline, their design fee, and all they have to do is press a button to take them to the contract and then press another button to pay. I mean, it's so easy. They'd almost be silly not to move forward at this point, right? Unless it really is a different reason. So wanted to kind of throw that out there. We can talk more about that. If you have questions, drop them in the Q&A. Last couple things, and this is just good business practice, right? Treat your clients like they are more than just a client. And I know that sounds redundant because you're like, of course, we want to treat our clients all nice and whatnot. But it really comes down to building a relationship by supporting them. Support is everything because, again, you can have all these great systems, a great design aesthetic, great socials. But then if your clients don't feel like you really care about them, again, they're going to be like, I was just another client. End result was great, but I'm not going to refer them. I'm not going to come back to them. I'm not going to shout their name when someone needs an interior designer referral, right? So building that relationship is so key. And obviously communication and intentionality come into that, but also figuring out how can you support your clients in a way that's unique to you and specific to them, right? So going above and beyond, not to say you need to do every single thing to be extra all the time, but even just simple things, right? Handwritten notes, gathering feedback regularly, right? Not just at the end. Maybe you send like a mid-project survey, or after they complete a certain phase, you send them a quick survey, something like that to understand their needs, or you do a feedback call with them, right? Capturing data in Dubsado to track their info, birthdays, anniversaries, their kids, right? You, again, for those of you mostly who are doing residential, commercial, you could figure out some different ways to tap into this, but especially residential, you're really getting into these people's lives. You're seeing their intimate space. You're building a home that they're going to spend their time in. And so noticing some of those things, sending a happy birthday note or happy anniversary, even if it's just an email, it's the thought that counts, right? And also supporting our clients and making it, again, easy to access you, easy to access documents, making sure they have the resources they need. All of those things, again, are pointing to the relationship that you are budding with them. And again, showing them that you, yes, obviously want them as a client, but you care about this project beyond just what it's going to do for you or business. Now, here's a couple of things I love to incorporate into support note. So things like the portal Dubsado, I found that interior designers really love this. This is something we've seen that's missed often, is like there's a lot of moving parts with design, right? There's a lot of documents, there's contracts, there's things they need to approve, forms, emails, they have invoices, especially when we start doing furniture orders. It can be very chaotic. Giving them something like the client portal where they can track all of this. They can see what needs to be completed. They see what invoices they have. They're able to see their appointments with. I love the client portal here. This is what it looks like to sign in. And what's great about it is that, it's password protected, or if you just use the email security function without the password, multiple people can access. So if you have, a partnership of a husband and wife or a commercial team that needs to access all the pieces, they can all hop into this portal. And feedback is everything. I have a free feedback form on my website. If you don't already have a Dubsado feedback form, it has like 40 questions that you can plug and play, delete, reuse, what have you. But again, using these strategically, whether it's within the project, after the project, making sure we're asking the right questions. At the end of the day, feedback forms aren't just to get a testimonial. Yes, that's great. We want nice 5-star reviews, but feedback forms are meant to give you feedback. They're meant to critique your business so you can see what's working, what's not. And I'll be honest, I have had a couple of experiences with clients where they weren't super satisfied with, for whatever reason, with the work I did. And I was able to capture that on a feedback form and turn around the relationship by asking those questions and making sure I responded to those questions and satisfied their needs, instead of just saying, hey, go leave a review, and then having a client who left feeling like they weren't taken care of. So these feedback forms are so important, and figuring out where you can weave those into your business are going to be key. Okay, so let's go into questions. I can stop yapping. So as a recap, making sure that we understand clients' needs first and foremost. And we can be strategic with how we understand those needs using Dubsado features like feedback forms, like consultation calls, our discovery questionnaire, asking the right questions on a lead capture, right? And then once we know those needs, we can communicate with intention, be clear and consistent, and really make sure we're informing the client and doing that with some automation, right? Take the burden off of you and supporting them from start to finish. This doesn't just mean when they actually book their project. This means from the first time they land on your website. We want to make sure that they know what's going on, they understand what to do next, and they feel supported in that journey. Okay, so Q&A, I'm going to just real quick jot this in. So if anyone needs to leave, they can at least see this and hear this. All of my links, chanelandlee.com. I do have a 40% off one item in my shop for you guys. Just use the code designer. And then I do have my Dubsado affiliate link as well. But all of that can be found in my Instagram. And then of course, designer 40% off. Okay, I'll let us open up Q&A now.
Fantastic. Taylor, you absolutely crushed it. I thought that was amazing. That's so much information you crammed in there. And I think that the way you go about your process just makes so much sense to me, at least. And I love what you do with Dubsado and how you kind of handle your clients. I think it's really fantastic. Just want to throw that out there. But yeah, let's take a look at the Q&A. I asked some questions myself as we were talking. I was like, oh, these are some good things to think about to percolate a little bit from the Dubsado end of things. So you were talking about following up, and I think I definitely agree. At least 2 follow-ups definitely make sense. But in the instance where maybe you follow up 3 or 4 times and you've actually differentiated how you're following up and someone's still not getting back to you, like I saw in your workflow, right? You're archiving that project. Makes total sense. But do you ever go back and circle back to the folks that you ended up archiving, or do you leave those folks in archived and let them come back to you organically? What's your perspective on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel like, if you've been intentional with the number of follow-ups, and maybe that is a few different vehicles and they still haven't followed back, obviously we're all human. Maybe they just genuinely forgot. They don't know what to say. They feel bad. Like, I would just let it sit and wait. Usually if I, in that last follow-up, if I really thought this was a great fit or they were going to book and I was kind of shocked that they didn't, I'll ask a type of question in that last follow-up to be like, hey, I'm going to assume that you're going in a different direction. If you don't mind, I would love to know what the reason is or why. It won't hurt my feelings, just helps me understand how to serve clients like you better. And a lot of times people will really respond and just be like, oh, too expensive, or I'm too busy right now, or honestly, I just was in over my head, or whatever the excuse is, or not excuse, but the reasoning. And I found that's helpful to kind of close it and not then seem like you're just pestering them over and over again.
Totally. Cool. No, that makes total sense. All right. Elena was asking, what apps or programs do you use to take notes? She seems like she prefers not using Dubsado's notes in the project, which is totally fine. But do you have any preferential apps that you use for note taking?
Yeah, so I definitely think from a designer industry, I think it is helpful to have some kind of project management system, and most do, right? Like an Asana, a Notion, a ClickUp. And I'll always tell my teams I work with, if you already have a system like that, use that as the note-taking app, right? Because you've already probably established that as the place to manage projects. Your team might be on there. So those of my clients who have a distinct, differentiation between client management and project management, I say keep those notes there. That way, anyone in the team who needs to access those notes, it can live in that area. And that way, you can refer to those notes if you're doing tasks within the project. And to piggyback, a lot of my clients that are designers will use the note section more specifically in that consult phase. Some of my designers, they have team members who take care of the initial booking or consult before it actually gets to the lead designer. And so having that note space directly in there when we're creating the scope or the proposal or we're planning or preparing for calls, that's when they seem to be using the note section the most. And then project management system once the project starts.
Cool. Awesome. All right. My other question that I was thinking while you were speaking was you talked a little bit about, obviously, in the section of, treating clients like they're more than just a client, and you're capturing a lot of client data. You're in their personal space. What's your preference for capturing that data in Dubsado? My first thought was custom map fields, but is that actually how you go about it?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh my gosh, yes. I love custom map fields. And for those of you who aren't familiar, the custom map fields, they're in your settings area and you can pop into this little tab here. And essentially you are just creating more fields to save data that Dubsado doesn't already have, like name, phone number, etc. What's cool about the fields, if you do a client field, it follows that client. So things like their birthday, their anniversary, maybe their time zone, pronouns, right? Things that are relevant to the client and would not change per project. Whereas maybe project, and this is my dummy account, so I have lots of different like random things here, but from a designer's perspective, maybe it's a certain contractor, their architecture, maybe it's certain information relevant to that project that you don't need to carry. I use these like crazy because I love that you can then use that smart field in an email or in a form or on a proposal or a contract. And then of course, I love that we can see the, if you turn them on in your customized menu, you can turn on which project custom fields you want to see from a bird's eye view. And so this is a lot of times my designers will have the contractor there or any other really important information. Maybe it's a gate code or something like that you need to reference very quickly. And then, of course, too, I know you know this, Trevor, but they might not. When that field is then present in the project, all you need to do is head into the project and you'll see the custom fields from a bird's eye view here. And now with the app, it's just like the custom map fields make so much sense. If someone's not using them, I'm like, you need to brainstorm all the mapped fields you want to make because they save so much time. Like you'll see I'm using it here as a link. Actually, so like in my own process, all my clients get a Google Drive folder. So I'll have my Zapier create the folder, name the folder, share the folder, but then I plug the link in here, which plugs the link smart field into a button in my onboarding form.
Yep. No, that's absolutely fantastic use of a project custom map fields. And on our last webinar, Taryn was actually talking about the exact same concept of using that spot date links. It's super streamlined and super easy. And I think, like I said, when you were talking about it, I was like, oh, we should definitely discuss custom map fields because I think it's one of those features of Dubsado that people might miss if they're not paying too close attention or if they're just getting into the system, they're not aware of it. But it can be really powerful as a way to capture that client data. So that's fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your screen, by the way, because that's exactly what I wanted to show folks.
Yeah. And on that note, because a lot of clients, especially designers or businesses who are also using Dubsado to manage a lot of data, like some of my designers will also put in their vendors here in Dubsado and they'll kind of separate vendors by statuses. So they might have like all of their, project vendors separated from their actual client projects. And tagging has been really big for that because people ask, should I use a tag or should I use a custom field? And I always say custom fields, yes, you could essentially still tag data as in like if you wanted to, label it as something. But if you're trying to filter that information, right? Like if I'm trying to find all of the projects who got furniture on their renovation or all of the projects who are doing a full construction or something like that, if I add the tag versus the field, the custom field, now I can search in my projects. And so something like I do, and I recommend my clients do, if you're capturing data at the end of the year and maybe you want to go in your archived and find all of the leads who inquired about renovation, right? If that was a tag here, I can now see all those projects. And so I love using tags if we know that we're going to need to filter or search that information later in bulk.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. That's a fantastic way to do it. Save you a lot of time from having to manually scan through all your projects and figure out who wanted what at the end of the year. Definitely.
Right.
Okay, cool. Moving on a little bit here. Sydney was asking just about bulk availability in Dubsado. This is one more question for me.
Yes.
Sydney, yes. I know it's been long in coming, but we're definitely working on that. We're working on what we would call scheduler, like templating out your entire availability. So availability templates still in the works, but we know that many a user would like that feature and functionality. So unfortunately, it's just going to be one of the situations where we say, hang on just a little bit longer, but we are working on it. So look forward to that in the future, Sydney. Sydney's other questions, she's got two more down here. So she was asking, would you use Dubsado for keeping documents and forms, or do you think using Dubsado is enough to use for the whole process? So I guess she's asking about, like, would you do everything in Dubsado, or would you just use Dubsado for more of this onboarding and kind of client acquisition phase? Or what's your thought with that? Talked a little bit about using some other stuff like Asana, but just in general for most folks, what would you think?
Yeah, it really depends. I always ask my clients, because I get asked this question all the time when we're mapping out what we want to put in Dubsado. And I always counter with a question of, like, how much is the client going to be participating in that particular portal or software or system, right? Because, for example, something like Asana or Notion, where you're managing your whole project and your team is involved, and these are all very internal pieces, your client's probably not stepping into there. And so using something like Dubsado, where we can eliminate another system that they have to go through, is ideal, right? If we know that they don't need, a very in-depth checklist, or they don't need to have the ability to do all these crazy things, we can then use the portal, because we can still pretty much do all the things we need to do in terms of sharing links and documents, scheduling, etc. However, if you are the type of business where the client is participating more and you need them to do more actions, like uploading lots of pieces or sending lots of things, where we know that they're going to have, it'd be easier for them to have one place to do that versus multiple forms or something, then I would say having a portal like Notion or something in conjunction with how you use Dubsado is fine, as long as you're clear about what and how they should use it, right? I think that's the biggest mistake, is we want to introduce a portal or a software or a tool for the clients to use with us, but it usually just kind of overwhelms them because they're not sure why they should use it or when or how, or then you have two different things and they're like, what do I do here? So keeping it simple and introducing it when it's necessary. And then, of course, being clear in your communication on what that next step is or what they need to find in that portal, etc.
Yep. I totally agree. That makes total sense. I guess Sydney's last question there was just an addendum to her initial question. She was asking about Notion and the client portal. I think we covered that. Let's see what else is here in the chat. Oh, Elena was asking about custom app fields. Cool. Sweet. Awesome. All right. I think we got through just about everything. Anybody else have any other questions before we hop off here? We're right at 45 minutes. We got a couple extra minutes if you wanted to answer any more questions, but if not, that's totally okay. Taylor, why don't you pop up that last slide on your presentation one more time, just in case folks wanted to see your links and offers real quick?
Yes. So I do have a really great free library I just released. It has a Dubsado one-click form, a lead capture one-click form, a pack of email templates, and a ton of trainings, Dubsado trainings, etc. So that's completely free. And then I do have a template shop where I actually just released this week an entire bundle for interior designers. It includes your project discovery questionnaire, your lead capture, your proposal scope of work, the one I showed you in the picture, your project questionnaire, which I spent so much time on gathering all the types of questions my client asked. So it covers every room in a residential project. It has like 85 questions on there for you. And then I also just released a canned email pack that has over 30 emails specifically for interior designers in different stages of the process, project updates, etc. So you do have that code for 40% off one item. And my website's a wealth of knowledge. So there's lots of, free resources. I have a YouTube with training. So if you're trying to kind of DIY things, please dive in. Shoot me a question on Instagram if you have one. I'm always answering, and no question's a dumb question. And then, of course, if you're looking to just hand it off and have me do it for you, I do take on clients for the signature setup, which is a completely done for you experience.
Fantastic. Cool. Thank you so much, Taylor. It's been an absolute pleasure. I think, like I said, you crushed it. I think this is a ton of really good information. So I hope folks that are here got a ton out of it. But otherwise, we'll catch you on the next one. And like I said, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to all of our attendees for being here as well. The recording will be sent out in a couple of hours after this webinar is completely finished. It just takes some time to process. And you can also find it on YouTube, usually at the end of the day or tomorrow. Taylor, thank
Perfect.
you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Pleasure.
See you guys later.